So we're going to discuss paper 2, candidate response booklet. Again, we'll be looking at some of these questions. So here we have the data type question. We can skip this. It's pretty simple. And then they're saying put 1 mark in the appropriate column. Okay, so in a lot of questions they do mention where you can put multiple check marks. Okay, if that is not written, so you don't have to do that. And secondly, in a lot of these questions, students tend to forget quotation marks on string, or they accidentally put quotation marks on a Boolean value. So please make sure you don't do that. Booleans are without quotation and strings are with quotation. So we can skip this question. Then we move to the next one. Right? Some candidates did not use quotation marks to denote character or string. Okay, this is a state transition diagram. We can skip this as well. This is very simple. All right, so now they're saying state. State means you just have to write down without explanation. That must be stored for each loan, and a system is being developed to help manage loans in the library, and they may borrow books. So they're saying start date, that is fine. The period of borrowing, that is fine. And then the name of the user. Okay, so the name of the user is not correct because the comment is from the exam that the name of user may not be unique and should not be used, right? So since the name is not unique, so what could be the issue? Maybe person A, there are 2 people with the same name and they both want the same book on the same day. So that could cause some issues. One operation manipulates the data stored for each loan. This will produce a list of all overdue books. Identify 2 other operations. Okay, so here they're saying end date calculation, okay, and the books returned available for the future. So this is all correct. So we can move to the student with after the next question. Okay, this is an ADT question, linked list question. Again, just a reminder, in ADTs, you would not be asked to write code from scratch, but you can definitely be given fill in the blanks for pseudocode. Okay, so you should still know the code. Okay, so linked list start pointer is correct, linked list is correct, and then they have written null pointer. Okay, so they accidentally wrote node and then they cut it out, so it's completely fine. And then all the others are fine, so they get full marks. Then let's look at the person with average grade. So they have written mode. Okay, so this is wrong. And then we look at the last one. So they have misidentified it as Q, and then everything else is going to be incorrect. They get 1 mark here for making the correct arrow from the start pointer to the cat. Okay, so these are usually the difficult questions because I see a lot of times that students actually prefer writing pseudocode over the English description of it. So you have to be very, very careful with these questions. Let's start. A teacher uses a paper-based system to store marks for a test. The teacher requires the program to assign grades based on these results. The program will output the grades together with the average mark. Write a detailed algorithm. So we are supposed to calculate the average of the grades that the teacher will input in this program. And now you're supposed to write detailed description. So you have to write the whole logic of pseudocode. Imagine you were going to do it with pseudocode and you just have to write that logic in English. So this student got 6, okay, 5 out of 6 marks. Okay, so they are saying to create a global 1D array. And then they are saying you have to input the marks. Okay, then you're supposed to add the marks. All right. Then they're saying that you have to check in a loop whether the marks is lower or equal, and if increment the array position until condition is met. Okay, so we'll keep on incrementing until we have seen all the values in the array. Let's say there are 50 students. Then they're saying that repeat steps 2 to 4. Okay, then they're saying in a loop output all the array elements. That is also fine. And then they're saying in the, okay, that's it. So they got 5 marks for 5 points. Now there is a comment here that says the candidate makes no reference to a variable used to store the count of students in the class. So they were not awarded marking point 1, right? Because we are supposed to find the average, and average would be calculated by sum divided by count. So they did not mention the variable count. That is why they lost 1 mark. And you can see they wrote a very good answer. Now someone who got 4 marks, so we can skip this, we can go to the low one. Okay, so the algorithm would input the marks first. So they got 2 marks, okay. Then find the average by adding the marks and dividing them by their number. And you can clearly see this is extremely vague. No mention of array, no mention of counter, no mention of loop, no mention of conditions. So this is not going to get enough marks. Then we have a question that says write a program to declare 1D array of 100 values. Each element random number between 1 to 200 and the numbers generated between 60 and 173. So this student got 5 out of 6 marks. Okay. First part is correct. They are generating values between 0 to 200. But this is wrong. Okay. So if I open the insert document, and if we look at the random function, so what does random function do? It will generate the values from 0 till the number excluding the number. Okay, so 87 would mean it will generate values from 0 till 86.99, and this is why it's wrong, because it doesn't start from 1 and it goes all the way till 199. So this would not generate the right number. And just a reminder, how do we do that in such a case? So there is a general expression for it, which is that you will calculate the random number and you will do it for the difference of the range. So let's say the range is 1 to 200, so the difference is going to be 199, and then you're going to add the starting number, which in our case is 1. So this random will generate the values between 0 to, in fact this should be, yeah, this should be 200, because this value will not be included. So technically it will be till 199. Okay, so this will generate values from 0 to 199, and then we can add, and when I add 1 and 0 I get 1, and when I add 1 and 199 I get 200. So this will make sure that the values are generated between 200 to 1. Okay, then they're saying describe the changes that need to be made to the algorithm so that each element will contain a unique value. Okay, now this is a question that has been tested in pseudocode as well. So what you have to do is, let's say you have multiple values in the array. So you have 30, you have 21, you have 50, and you have 73. So what you'll do is, before you put in a value here in the next index, you're going to compare it with all the previous indices in the array. And then you have to make sure that it doesn't match with any of these. So that is what you have to explain. So they're saying, instead of directly assigning it to an element in a post conditional loop, check if the assigned element's new random number generated. If the element is unique, then it will exit. Okay, they're saying, and then the following element in the array. Okay, so they're saying the following element is vague. So what you had to write was that you will increment the index to by 1 to point to next index in array. Now this will get you the whole mark, instead of saying following element. Okay, so you have to refer to the index. So we can skip this question. So this is somebody who got average mark. Okay, so they have written line numbers. This is also a good practice. Okay, you can do this in the exam. It kind of makes it easy for you to add or remove anything, and also easier to mark this way, and the indentation is also up to the point. So again, random number is not done correctly. This random generation is not assigned into a variable, and then you can see that pretty much of it is fine. Okay, now the person with low marks, so they have declared. Okay, then repeat. So they have used some MIO, which is again wrong. Then they have assigned the for loop into an input variable. So input is wrong because it's a keyword, and for loop does not work like this. And then they have until rnum, so they have missed the equal sign here as well, right? So they just get 1 mark, and that was for declaration. So you can see, even though they wrote the whole code, that is not good enough until you write the actual stuff. Describe the changes. So this is not done properly. Okay, so here we have a simple table question. Write a simplified version of the line in statement 12. In statement 12, we have if not next charge less than a or greater than z, then. And here they've written if not greater than a. Okay, so this is not allowed. Okay, so I've told you this multiple times. You have to use the variable name again for every condition. The candidate is awarded 1 mark for using not, recognizing the attempted simplification, but the inner part is wrong. Right, so yes, this is the correct suggestion. So you have to rewrite the variable name like this, otherwise it will not be correct. Okay, then there's a question that says that you have to count and output the number of each vowel and then other alphabetic characters. So this person got 6 out of 8 marks. So we can just move to the middle one. Okay, they got 4 marks. So let's see. They put a counter. Okay. Then they are extracting one value at a time. All right. They have the correct procedure header. So they're ending it as well. All right. Then they're saying mid. Okay, mid is fine. Okay, here they're saying A, E, I, O, U. If it's any one of these, you will go to a certain index and then you'll increment the value by 1. But the comment says the candidate is not awarded mark number 5. They use mid correctly, but the identifier counter starts on 0, which would be an invalid value. So where is the counter? Okay, here, right? So this is going to cause an issue. Okay, and then the candidate is not awarded marking point 7. So they have solution would count all the non-vowel characters, not just alphabetic. Right? So they have written A, E, I, O, U, and otherwise they are simply adding all the values into this variable here, and this keeps on incrementing. So this is again wrong. Okay, and how could they be improved? Let's look at the low response. Okay, so they have the array here, they have initialized. Okay, this is good, but they could have used a loop here to save time in the exam. Then they have the procedure, they have the mid. Okay, this looks a bit vague, and then rest of it is pretty vague. They only got 2 marks. So all of this is not correct because they're not checking it accurately, and then they get the candidate does not give any output, so they are not awarded any marks. So they just do end if, and then they only get 2 marks, one for initialization and one for the comparison part. So how could they be improved? So the end procedure was missing. Declared the variable used to be used as a loop counter. Okay, so this is extremely important. जो भी आप लोग for loop में use कर रहे हो, if it is W, so you need to declare the W as well, I as well, J as well. Okay, so I've repeated this multiple times. Please keep that in mind. Then the candidate could have included the initial value in the loop statement. The candidate needed to make sure that the comparison for each of the vowel was correct, and then ignore alphabetic characters using else clause. And then what were the common mistakes? The char count array was not initialized. Okay, so whenever you're using an array to count values to total values, everything must be initialized to 0. Otherwise, you cannot assume that the array will start from 0. Okay, that is never the case, and we cannot make that assumption. Okay, so then we have the format name. This has strings and parameters. Leading spaces will be removed, trailing spaces will be removed, multiple spaces will be converted to a single space. Okay, and then they're saying explain ways of exposing the fault. There's a fault in the program, which means the assignment does not always take place. So they've written comparing the trace table to the values given by a variable watch. Okay, and then they have said that implementing while white box testing. Okay, white box testing. So they got how many marks for this? 1 out of 2. Okay, so the second part was correct. The first part was a bit vague. So you just had to talk about the testing techniques. This is the middle one. Okay, so they're saying by testing all the lines. So this gets a straight 0. No explanation given here. And then this is somebody with a weak response. And then they're saying use of white box testing, testing every statement one by one. This is fine. Then use of dummies to check for any errors. So what they wanted to write here was probably stub testing, right? But that is not written here. So this is again wrong. So what they meant by dummies, we do not know. And then there's another pseudocode question. So we can skip to the middle grade. Okay, so they're saying that you have to produce a new string of initials, and this is IDE, so this must be converted to IDE, and then we have TAS, etc. So this must be converted to ASCII. Okay. Again, you can see a lot of cutting, but there is no mark deducted for cutting. They have done declarations as well. They are using the correct statements. They have a loop here. using the correct array, and then they're ending. So this is all good. They are okay. This is also up to the mark. So they have, okay, you don't need to write do here. Okay, this is just extra. So they're calling a function. They're assigning the value to a variable. They're comparing the values. Then calling the function, again checking. So you don't need to put a semicolon here. But this is not, this is still avoided. Okay, it's not a syntax error. Until end of file of end string is equal to true, etc. Okay, so they're saying the candidate is not awarded marking point 2 because their loop termination condition is invalid. So until end of file of fn string. Now let's see what fn string is. Okay, fn string has nothing, I believe. Yep, fn string is just a null string. So they're saying until end of file of fn string becomes true. So this is vague, so that is wrong. And in case of a low marking candidate, they got 3 marks here. So they have the header and then the correct parameters, their types, declaration, initializing, while loop. So they were not awarded the marking point 2 here if lk string is equal to ignore less than index, and the candidate was awarded for returning the value correctly. And please remember, you must not ever redeclare the variable inside the parameter inside the function or the procedure. Okay, con mistakes. So did not attempt to convert the strings being compared to a known case. So whenever we are making string comparison, and if the case sensitivity is not an issue, so we should always convert them to the same case. Okay, either to lower or to upper. Otherwise, there will always be a mismatch of values. And then you have to remember that this is how the function is called, and then it is stored in a variable, and procedure is called using call, and then the name. And then many candidates use the plus sign to concatenate strings, which is wrong. So in pseudocode, you have to use the ampersand operator, which is also given in the insert if you forget it in the exam. So this is also written here. That's the whole response booklet.